Welcome to the Behavior Grooves Podcast. My name is Kurt Nelson.
And I'm Tim Houlihan. And welcome to our grooving session where Kurt and I get to explore the magic of goals. Dun, dun, dun! Heavy organ music.
Yes, Tim, we get to explore the magic of goals in this episode. But before we do that, we have a special offer for our listeners.
We do?
Yes. Would you like to be a guest featured on a future Behavioral Grooves podcast where you get to ask Tim or myself 3 questions?
We're doing this?
Yes, we are going to do this. So, Tim, we will randomly select a winner from the people who post this episode out to their favorite social media account and tag us with the hashtag #IWantToBeYourSpecialGuest.
Okay, so all listeners have to do is post this episode out on Twitter or Facebook or LinkedIn, right? And they're going to let us know that they did it by using the hashtag I want to be your special guest.
Yes.
Is that it?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, you might want to add in behavioral groove somewhere in there so we know it. But otherwise, hashtag I want to be your special guest. And if you misspell special, well, too bad. You're not eligible. So
sounds like fun.
It will be. Who would not want to have 5 minutes of glory by being on this wonderful podcast?
It's only 5 minutes?
Well, I don't know. How long can we do? 3 questions? Man, boom, boom, boom. We're fast.
Okay.
Right.
I think it'll be fun.
Yes. Hopefully people will find it fun. We'll see how well this takes off. Yes. Who knows? Yes. All right. So with that, Tim, we were going to talk about the magic of goals. So what is so magical about goals?
What is so magical about goals is that we take them so much for granted right now. In 1960, when Ed Locke started studying goals, and then with Gary Latham, nobody really believed that goals made a big difference.
What do you mean? Explain that a little bit more.
So their early work in the early 1960s, Ed Locke started to realize that people who set goals are more likely to achieve. And that phrase has become synonymous with goals and has been completely misused, by the way. I'm just going to rant here for just a second because there's so much emphasis on the word goals and especially in the corporate world, we miss the set goals. Setting goals is the operative word. That the act of setting the goal is what actually gets people super engaged, gets motivation going. All kinds of great psychological things happen when people set goals. And no one knew that before Ed Locke and Gary Latham started to study this.
Okay, so going back to those studies, I believe, and correct me, right, they looked at forestry and cutting down trees, and they had a couple different scenarios that they were looking at where some people were just told out, cut down as many trees as you can, do your best, right?
Yeah.
Some were giving a low goal and others were given, right? These were given
assigned,
goals, assigned, a stretch goal. And so tell us about a little bit more about that.
So it turns out that the stretch goals, these even when they're assigned, they raise the bar, and it's more likely that people will perform at higher levels when they're actually challenged to do so.
Okay.
So higher goals actually deliver higher performance. In general, right? This isn't every single human being, but this in general, higher goals deliver higher performance.
Now, I want to come back to that component in a bit, in what makes a stretch goal and what makes it seem unachievable versus achievable. All of those things, and we'll talk about that. But before we do that, tell me about the setting goal part that you were so ranting about just a few minutes before.
So it's so important for, especially in the corporate world, that people feel a sense of ownership, endowment, right? The IKEA effect that goes into creating your own goal. And that happens so rarely. Most of the time, goals are fashioned in the forges on Mount Olympus and handed out like Mardi Gras beads, Mm-hmm. I mean, they're just... goals are so unidirectional these days that we've really lost the idea that the people who are doing the work have a powerful impact on well, they get the work done. So asking them to set a goal, to be participative in the setting of the goal, is much more. It's much more successful. They're more likely to achieve than if you just hand them a goal.
And I know you've done a lot of work in this area. One of the challenges that I think businesses, the perceived challenge that businesses come back at and saying, well, they won't set a goal that will make us as an organization achieve our objective, that they will set an easy goal for themselves because that will make it easier for them to achieve. Why would they ever, go above and beyond? Is that what you have seen or experienced in the work that you've done around this? And tell us a little bit about that work.
Yeah. So this is where choice architecture comes into it, right?
Okay.
You can actually create a framework where there is something that based on the run rate or the anticipated level of performance, and this works especially well with salespeople. By the way, this is there are other applications, but let's just think about salespeople. They are delivering at a relatively constant rate, at least over a long period of time. There's a relative level of growth and consistency in their performance. And so you could anticipate that during maybe the upcoming quarter, they would deliver a certain level of performance.
Okay.
And
X number of units,
dollars,
volume, whatever
margin,
that would be.
Yeah, whatever the objective measure would be. You could say, well, we could anticipate that this person will do that. And then you could use choice architecture to provide 3 levels above that run rate to say if you and those are self-selected. Those are completely self-selected. And in a model that I've worked with in the past under a patented product called GoalQuest, those levels are all or nothing. So if you select, if I'm the sales rep and I select the least aggressive level, but I perform at a higher level, I still only get paid out at the lowest level. And there's some magic in this, getting back to loss aversion, right? We've talked about loss aversion in the past. Loss aversion is a powerful motivator of human behavior. Consequently, if you were to select the most aggressive goal and you perform just beneath it and you didn't quite achieve it, then you get nothing.
So let me see if I understand this. You have a run rate and you have above that, and then you have 3 goals that people can choose from. Let's just say, all right, my run rate is 10. So the first level might be 12, selling 12. Mm-hmm. The next level, would it be 14 or would it be 15 potentially? And then maybe 18 on the other one? Or would it be 12, 14, 16?
Whatever is reasonable and perceived as achievable for that situation.
Okay. And so then with that, if I was to go and select level 3, of course I'm going to be able to get 16 units, right? Mm-hmm. But I come in at 15, I don't revert back down to the level 2 payout. No, I get nothing.
You get nothing.
Same thing if I was at 15, but I had selected 1, which was 12. I don't get paid out at level 2. I just get paid out at level 1. Is that correct?
That's exactly right.
Okay.
A few years ago, Dan Ariely and I worked on studying this with a large U.S.-based telco.
Okay.
And what we found is that the people who and so we set up a matrix where there was a control group that had the 3 levels that were simply that were available to them above their run rate, and those 3 levels could, whatever they achieved is whatever they got.
Okay.
And then the test group saw the 3 levels. They had to select and commit to that level with this all or nothing factor.
Okay.
And found that the people that committed to the all or nothing performed at almost 47% higher rate than those who simply earned at whatever level.
Wow.
So this aspect of setting the goal is powerful juju. It's really, really powerful stuff.
Okay. So we have the component where that loss aversion comes into play on that, and the goal in having your own choice allowed within that goal be a powerful motivator to achieving that goal.
Right. Right. There's this endowment effect that comes from that. Then there's the pressurizing effect that comes from that of I'm putting the pressure on myself because I picked it. this didn't come down from Mount Olympus. This was mine. And those are two. That's it's a powerful combination.
And it's interesting because if you look at goals and the research around goals usually has come from the business academia world. Locke and Latham do a lot of in publishing in Journal of Management and a variety of other business publications.
Yeah.
While loss aversion comes from the psychology side or the behavioral economics side.
The Kahneman and Tversky.
Kahneman, and so you're bringing these two components together. And we've had this conversation in the past with James Heyman that there's some magic, going back to our magical term, that happens when you bring different disciplines together to solve an issue. And I know we had talked a little bit earlier about you had a conversation actually with Ed Locke about this.
Yeah.
And you guys were talking. So just some background information. Tim worked on the Goal Quest, the patented operation, when you worked at BI Worldwide, who owns the patent and runs this. And so you had talked with Ed Locke many years ago.
Yeah.
Tell us about that story.
Well, the hope was that because Ed was deeply invested in the business literature and in goal setting, that the extra twist of having this all or nothing in the self-selection would be something that he would have found. Maybe he wouldn't marvel at it, but he would find it at least clever.
Okay.
And we found that our conversation with Dr. Locke was not so fulfilling. Let's just put it that way. He was kind of focused on, well, this is just the big difference was self-selection versus assigned. And he said, we've already studied that.
Okay.
And so I think he was missing out on the nuance of this all or nothing element. Within
the loss aversion, the psychology research. And so I think it's really interesting too, because as we one of our future grooving sessions is going to be on priming.
Yes.
And there has been some recent work by actually Gary Latham and Ed Locke a little bit, and Stajovic. I can never remember his first name. I apologize. But they are coming at this from a business goal perspective and looking at that. The research on priming has been typically in the past been in the social psychology world, and they did not mix. And so up until real recently, there hasn't been much overlap in that. And again, with that overlap, there has been some really interesting work that is coming out of that about conscious goals versus subconscious or primed goals.
Primed goals,
and the very different aspects of how they operate in your mind and the impact that they have. And so we'll talk about that. We digress.
Well, yeah, we will talk about that more because, but when it comes to the magic of goals, the next phase of goal research has got to, I think we need to exploit the priming aspect and the power of priming in a business setting, in a field study.
Exploit in a positive, do good manner.
Absolutely. Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. I go back to Christina Gravert and nudge for good.
Nudge for good. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there. Anything else about goals that you wanted to get into at this point?
Well, there's one other thing that I really love about goals, and this came from Ran Kivetz at Columbia. And with Itamar Simonson, Ran Kivetz studied idiosyncratic fit.
Okay.
And that's the situation. Idiosyncratic fit is where we believe that we have the unique advantage to succeed. And a self-selected goal really plays to this, right? Because we feel like if we selected it, we're in a unique position to be successful. And that's a powerful, powerful thing when we start thinking about our motivations, right? Kivetz then also studied two things specifically related to goals. One came from Clark Hall back in the 1930s, and that is the illusionary progress to goal and goal gradient theory.
Okay, tell us about illusionary progress to goal and goal gradient theory.
These are so great. So Kivetz ran a study at Columbia on, buy 10 coffees, get one free.
Okay.
Pretty simple model. And so they went into the coffee shop and they handed out cards that was buy 10 get one free. But then they also handed out buy 12 coffees get one free. But the first 2 coffees were actually already stamped. You already got those for free.
So
you had illusionary progress toward your goal of 12 coffees. So in effect, both cards were buy 10 coffees, get one free. But with the one that was buy 12, you felt like you were actually a little farther ahead. And in fact, that's what people did. People actually consumed more coffee faster with the buy 12, get one free when those first 2 were clicked off.
I think it was 12 days versus 15 days, right? So
yes.
almost 3, there's some point component within there. But 3-day difference, which is statistically significant.
Dramatic.
Yes.
Just absolutely dramatic.
So the people that had a 12 punch card with 2 already punched completed that card in 12 point some days versus the people who just had the 10. And so that goes back into this goal gradient theory. What does goal gradient theory?
So this is based on the behaviorist, the animal behaviorist Clark Hall, when he discovered that rats in a maze actually start to run faster as they get closer to the cheese. And so this is a natural aspect in the entire animal kingdom, humans no less. But if we naturally accelerate our effort as we get closer to the goal, this is something that can be taken advantage of in the design of incentive programs. That what is commonly called the fast finish.
Okay.
Right? The fast finish. This happens naturally, and that can be ratcheted up with additional incentive or additional focus, communication. There's a variety of ways of taking advantage of that.
So this is like when my kids used to be young and we would walk to the park, which is about 8-9 blocks away from here, and we would start off right.
That can be a long walk for a little.
It's kind of a long walk. We would start off, and they would be all excited, and they're running, and they're going. We're going to the park. We're going, and that was for about 2 blocks. And then block 3 comes, and it slows down, and block 4 it gets a little bit more, and by block 5. I'm probably carrying one, if not both, of my kids, up until we get to block 7 or 8, where all of a sudden
is it in sight at this point?
Almost in sight, or they know it's just around the corner, and all of a sudden they're getting down, and by the time it becomes in sight, it becomes they're back to running. And so they're running towards the park.
That's a great example, because that is exactly what happens right in the business world as well. We do this when our goals are established around selling or around completing projects. We've talked about cramming the night before and how much work gets done on a project in the last 48 hours before it's due. That's the natural human tendency. So that is something that can be managed and something that can be taken advantage of by saying, okay, we want to back some of the work up. So let's work against goal gradient, or let's take advantage of it from a selling perspective and just blow it out.
Okay.
In the last 2 weeks of the quarter. So that's I love goals and could talk about this research all day long. But the work on priming, that's the next step.
Yeah, and we will be talking about that in a future episode. And so it might be the episode that you guest listener who wants to ask Tim and me 3 questions could be a part of. I don't know. It depends on when the timing happens for that.
Could be.
All right. So, Tim, I think we will probably come back to goals at some other point and maybe another grooving session. But for now, anything else that you want to add?
No, but how about this? Set a goal to go out and give us a review.
All right, that's Tim's goal for you. Is that a hard enough goal? How about we set a goal for all of our listeners to go out and share this podcast with 3 of their friends? Just link to it, send it out to 3 of their friends via
with a
text.
Hashtag check it out.
Hashtag I want to be your special guest. If it's on a social media platform, that is, because that way you're entered into our wonderful contest.
Of course, this also feels like it's coming down from Mount Olympus, and it's not going to be self-selected. But we ask that you self-select this as your goal. So thank you. Thanks for listening. Check us out. Share it with your friends. Grab it from your favorite podcatcher, streaming on Spotify these days. 74 countries. What else? I don't know, Kurt.
I don't know. But with that, I hope you make all of your goals come true.